My name is Rachel Sargent, and I'm from Sterling, Virginia. And my question is directed at Bob, but he can answer later. But what do you think of Grover Norquist and his alliances with the Muslim Brotherhood and how it has trickled down into our Virginia politics?
All right, and we start with Mark 7.
Well, of course, Grover Norquist is somebody I think we have to watch very closely. Frank Wolf, a couple of years ago, explained this in very eloquent form on the floor of the House of Representatives. I think he was also one of only 6 members of the House that did not sign his pledge to raise taxes under any conditions. I agree with Frank Wolf on that. I'm not saying that I would ever raise taxes, but, never say never, because you don't know if there's going to be some type of an economic disaster in this country or a military disaster in this country. And I think it's important that we not go up there without having an open mind. Again, I wouldn't raise taxes, but I think it's dangerous to have somebody, especially like Grover Norquist, that bullies people into signing an agreement. Our job is to represent the members of the district. We have to protect them no matter what it takes. So again, I wouldn't have signed that notice or that pledge.
What about his Muslim influences, the fact that he has meetings regularly with the Muslim Brotherhood?
Right, and there's a question as to where some of his funds go to fund some of these terrorist groups.
And that he's also sits on the board right here at Parental Rights, and it was told to me that it was an evangelical move as opposed to the fact that he also supports gay rights.
Right, and I agree that Frank Wolf said this is something that needs to be looked into, it needs to be investigated, and I agree with that 100%.
Rob Wasinger.
Thank you, Rachel. First, let me also thank you for all the great work you do for the pro-life movement in Virginia. You do a great job. We really appreciate that. I think, Grover's had past associations with Jack Abramoff and other people in various government scandals. I think and Barbara. And I think some of this crony capitalism that is infiltrating the Republican Party really needs to be confronted head on. And I think some of the alliances that he's made in the past, the one you mentioned with the Brotherhood, is very, very troubling and deserves a lot of investigation. But there's other ones, too. And I think some of the work for the gay rights community is also very troubling. I think what we need here is a conservative that can go out in the general and articulate a strong conservative message and not apologize. But you raise a lot of good questions that need to be answered, I think. Thank you, Rachel.
Stephen Hollingshead.
Well, thank you for giving me a copy of Frank's new book. I've been a little busy the last week since you gave it to me and haven't read it yet. So I don't know enough about Grover's activities in that regard. I have told Grover that I can't sign his pledge, not quite for the reason that Mark mentions, but because it's not conservative enough. I had this conversation with him where I said, hey, no problem with the first half of the pledge, not raising taxes. I understand there's only 5 presidents ever who've ever cut taxes in the 101-year history of the income tax, and every single time it's been cut, revenues have dipped and then surged because the economy does better, it brings in more to the government. So there's no good reason to raise taxes. The problem is a little bit in the second part where he says you never do away with a deduction without getting a corresponding rate increase. Well, that's fine for big deductions where you can do that, but for a little deduction like a solar panel deduction where you couldn't do that, I asked Grover, I said, would that violate your pledge? And he said, well, of course it would, but nobody would ever introduce such a bill. And I said, I'm running for Congress, I will.
Howie Lind.
Great question. The Muslim Brotherhood, they pose a grave threat to this nation. They're already in here. They're infiltrated across the government, across the country. There's a book called Infiltration years ago written. But yes, Frank Gaffney, your book is great on that, on Grover, all his shenanigans, all his connections. And I go back to what I said earlier about when Frank and Diana West and Steve Coughlin came to my home last year and spoke on Sharia law. It was a very great effort. Steve Coughlin, I don't know if he's here today or not. That's a case in point of what we're facing right now with this, exactly your question. Stephen was a defense, he's a naval officer, naval intel reserve officer, a defense contractor, was in the Pentagon talking about this stuff. He was basically thrown out, literally thrown out, and his security clearance was taken away, just like I spoke of earlier. This is terrible. Our government from the top down is trying to silence any talk about Muslim Brotherhood effects of what's going on in our nation right now. Thank you.
And Bob Marshall.
I authored a statute which set up the Virginia Commission on Immigration to look at all sides of this issue, legal, illegal, nice, bad, whatever. The appointees to this commission included an individual who was exceptionally hostile to the State of Israel and who had affiliations with the Muslim Brotherhood. Delegate Gilbert and I talked about this. We brought this to the attention of Governor Kane. He asked him to leave the commission because I did not think this individual would be fair and unbiased. We had him replaced. That's my experience. When I see a threat, when I see something that I think is not fair, I will speak up. It doesn't matter who, what's going on, I will stand up for the values that we have from our Constitution, which come from our Creator.
Do you, more specifically, do you believe that the Muslim Brotherhood is a threat in Virginia and that Grover Norquist is part of that situation?
I don't know about Grover, but I know that Muslim Brotherhood, I haven't read the book yet, but we got him off the commission because of his affiliations with the Muslim Brotherhood.